She rejected the Korean Mafia boss son every woman wanted, and it drove him crazy. Seoul shimmered like liquid gold beneath the night sky. The annual Han River Royal Charity Gala was the most exclusive event of the year, an invitation-only gathering of elites, billionaires, politicians, and those powerful enough to pretend they weren't afraid of one particular family. The Kang family. Crystal chandeliers glowed like captured stars above marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Soft violin music floated through the ballroom. Cameras flashed. Laughter echoed. But beneath the luxury, there was tension, because everyone knew he was coming. When the grand doors opened, conversation lowered instantly, like someone had turned down the volume of the entire room. Kang Min-Jae, the only son of Korea's most feared mafia patriarch. He didn't rush. He never did.
Tall.
Sharp black tuxedo tailored to perfection. Dark hair brushed back with deliberate precision. A face carved from discipline and danger. His eyes scanned the room, not searching, but assessing. Women shifted. Some straightened their backs. Others subtly adjusted their lipstick or smoothed their dresses. He had that effect. Min-Jae wasn't just wealthy. He was power wrapped in calm. And power was seductive. A socialite in silver stepped forward first. "Mr. Kang, it's such an honor." He gave a polite nod. Controlled. Unattached. Another woman laughed too loudly at something he hadn't said. He was used to it. They didn't want him. They wanted proximity to his influence. They wanted to be chosen. Across the room, however, stood the only woman who didn't look his way. Joyce Adeyemi. Emerald silk draped over her figure like it had been designed with her in mind. Her skin glowed under the chandelier light, rich and radiant. Her natural curls framed a face that carried both intelligence and quiet fire. She wasn't clinging to a billionaire. She wasn't scanning the room for status. She was studying a painting on the far wall, one hand lightly holding a champagne glass, completely undisturbed by his arrival. Min-Jae noticed her instantly, not because she was the loudest, but because she was the calmest. He watched her for a moment longer than he should have. She didn't look impressed. Did she not know who he was? Or did she simply not care? Curiosity, a rare feeling for him, stirred. He excused himself from the circle forming around him and walked toward her. Each step confident, unhurried. Conversations parted naturally in his wake. Joyce sensed someone approach, but didn't turn immediately. She didn't react the way others did. "Interesting. You're the only person in this room not staring," Min-Jae said smoothly, stopping beside her. His voice was low, controlled, almost amused. Joyce finally turned her head. Their eyes met. For a split second, something shifted in the air. Not intimidation. Not admiration. Assessment. "I prefer art that speaks," she replied calmly. "Not rooms that whisper." A subtle murmur passed through nearby guests who had started listening. Min-Jae's brow lifted slightly. "Are you suggesting I'm noise?" She took a slow sip of champagne before answering. "I'm suggesting I don't clap just because everyone else does." The corner of his mouth twitched.
No one spoke to him like that. Ever.
"Do you know who I am?" he asked, not arrogantly, but as fact. Joyce faced him fully now. "Yes," she said evenly. "You're Kang Min-Jae."
No awe.
No hesitation. Just recognition. "And you're not impressed?" he pressed. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Should I be?" The question wasn't flirtatious. It was sincere. That was what unsettled him. Women usually tried to impress him. She was evaluating whether he deserved her attention. He felt something unfamiliar. Challenge. "I'm rarely questioned," he admitted quietly. "That sounds lonely," Joyce replied. The words hit deeper than intended. For a brief moment, the confident heir hesitated. Lonely? No one had ever described his world that way. He chose to shift the tension. "And what would impress you, miss?" "Adeyemi," she supplied. Joyce Adeyemi. The name lingered in his mind. "And what would impress you, Joyce Adeyemi?" She didn't hesitate. Character. He let out a quiet exhale. "Power isn't enough?" "Power is common," she said calmly. "Integrity isn't." Silence settled between them.
Not awkward.
Heavy. Around them, eyes were watching. Whispers started. Who is she? She's speaking to him like that? Does she not know what family he belongs to? But Joyce knew. And she still stood steady. Min-Jae studied her carefully now. She wasn't trying to provoke him. She simply refused to perform. And something inside him, something dangerously intrigued, leaned closer. You're bold, he said. No, she replied softly. I'm just not afraid. That was the moment it happened. For the first time in years, someone didn't fear him. And it shook him more than any insult ever could. Before he could respond, the host called him to the stage for a formal acknowledgement. Min-Jae held her gaze 1 second longer. This conversation isn't finished. Joyce gave a faint smile. It was never started. He walked away, but this time, the room's applause meant nothing. Because his mind wasn't on the crowd. It was on the woman in emerald who had looked at him like he was just a man. Not a legend. Not a threat. Just a man. And for Kang Min-Jae, that was unacceptable. Every woman wanted him. But the only one he noticed had just rejected him without even trying. And it drove him crazy. The orchids arrived at 9:07 a.m. Joyce Adeyemi was halfway through a strategy meeting when her assistant hesitated at the glass door of her office. Ma'am, these were just delivered. Every head at the conference table turned. The bouquet was exquisite, rare white ghost orchids, flown in and arranged in black silk wrapping. Elegant. Expensive. Intentional. Joyce didn't need a card to know who sent them. But there was one. Minimal. I don't enjoy unfinished conversations. A faint smirk tugged at her lips. Of course he didn't. Men like Kang Min-Jae weren't used to conversations ending on someone else's terms. Place them on the table, she said calmly, returning to her presentation without missing a beat. Her board members exchanged curious glances. One leaned forward slightly. Are those from the Kang family? Joyce clicked to the next slide. My business is not influenced by flowers, she replied evenly. Let's stay focused. Professional. Unshaken. But when the meeting ended and her office fell silent, she finally stood and walked toward the bouquet. She studied it. The craftsmanship. The message. The confidence. It wasn't romantic. It was strategic. Min-Jae didn't send flowers to court her. He sent them to assert presence. To remind her he could reach her world effortlessly. Joyce picked up the card again. I don't enjoy unfinished conversations. Her expression hardened slightly. Then learn to live with discomfort, she murmured. She pressed the intercom. Return them. Her assistant blinked. Return them?
Yes.
With this. Joyce pulled a sheet from her notebook and wrote in deliberate strokes. I don't date men who think attention is a currency. Joyce Adeyemi. She placed the note carefully among the orchids. No damage, she added. Send them back exactly as they arrived. Across the city, inside the private upper floor of the Kang corporate tower, Min-Jae stood before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. He rarely waited for anything. But today, he found himself glancing at the elevator display more than once. His right-hand man stepped inside his office quietly. The delivery returned, sir. Min-Jae didn't turn immediately. Returned? They were refused, he asked coolly.
No, sir.
They were sent back. There was a difference. He turned slowly. Explain. The orchids were placed on his desk, untouched.
Perfect.
Pristine. And inside them, her note. Min-Jae read it once. Then again. His jaw flexed. The room grew noticeably colder. Most women would have taken a photo. Posted it subtly online. Allowed speculation to bloom. Joyce Adeyemi had rejected it like a business proposal she found insulting. His men shifted uncomfortably, waiting for a reaction. Anger. Orders. Retaliation. But none came. Instead, something more dangerous flickered behind his eyes. Interest. She returned them untouched, he observed quietly. Yes, sir. No theatrics. No public humiliation. Just a clean, decisive boundary. He walked toward the desk and touched one of the orchid petals. She doesn't want my attention, he murmured. His right-hand man hesitated. Shall we discontinue pursuit? Min-Jae's gaze sharpened instantly. Pursuit, he repeated. He let out a quiet breath. No. Not because he wanted to dominate her, but because she had done something no one else dared to do. She treated him like an ordinary man, and he didn't know whether to resent it or crave it. That evening, Joyce attended a private networking dinner hosted by foreign investors. She wore navy this time. Simple. Powerful. As she stepped out of her car, a black luxury sedan pulled up behind her. She didn't need to look to know.
Still, she did.
Min-Jae stepped out. Alone. No entourage this time. Their eyes met across the pavement. The tension was immediate. You return my gift, he said as he approached. I don't accept liabilities, she replied smoothly. A flicker of amusement passed through his face. Flowers are liabilities. Intentions can be. He stopped just a step closer than necessary. You assume too much. And you assume access, she countered. For a moment, neither spoke. The city noise faded around them. You could have ignored them, he said quietly. Instead, you sent a message. I believe in clarity, Joyce replied. His gaze searched her face. You think I'm trying to buy you. I think you're used to people reacting predictably. And you, he asked softly. I'm not predictable. He studied her like a puzzle he intended to solve. Is this about my name? He asked. My family. It's about independence, she said. I built everything I have without attaching myself to power. He stepped closer. And if power chooses you? She didn't move back. Then power learns boundaries. A long silence stretched between them. He wasn't used to negotiating his presence. Yet here he was on a sidewalk being corrected. And instead of anger, something burned hotter. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't impressed by him. She wasn't trying to leverage him. She simply refused him. And that did something to his ego he didn't understand. Most women compete for my attention, he said finally. Joyce's eyes held steady. I'm not most women. A car horn sounded nearby. The investors were beginning to enter the building. Joyce glanced toward the entrance. I have a dinner to attend, she said calmly. And I have a question, Min-Jae replied. She paused. What makes you think you're not curious about me? For the first time, something subtle flickered in her eyes. Curiosity. But she buried it quickly. Curiosity, she said softly, is not permission. Then she walked past him. No hesitation. No backward glance. Min-Jae stood still, watching her. Most rejections bruised pride. This one? It ignited something far more complicated. Not desire alone. Not conquest. Challenge. She had drawn a line. And instead of crossing it, he found himself wondering how to step over it without breaking it. That night, long after the city slept, Kang Min-Jae remained awake. Not angry. Not insulted. But unsettled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't being chased. He was being evaluated. And Joyce Adeyemi had made one thing painfully clear. He would not win her with money. He would not win her with intimidation. If he wanted her attention, he would have to earn it. And that realization drove him even crazier than rejection ever could. 2 weeks later, the entire city's elite gathered inside the Grand Aurora Gallery for the winter prestige auction. It wasn't just an art event. It was a battlefield disguised in champagne and silk, rare sculptures, private collectors, international bidders, silent rivalries masked by polite smiles. And tonight's centerpiece? A contemporary African sculpture titled Resilience, carved from obsidian and bronze. Bold. Unapologetic. Commanding. Joyce Adeyemi had been waiting for this piece for months. She arrived early, dressed in a structured black gown that radiated authority. No glitter. No excess. Just presence. When she stepped into the gallery, conversations lowered. Not because of fear, but because she carried herself like a woman who knew her value. She reviewed the catalog calmly, already calculating her bid range. She did not expect him to be there. But of course, Kang Min-Jae was already inside, leaning casually against a marble column, tailored in charcoal gray this time. Effortless. Watching. Not the art. Her. Their eyes locked from across the room. No smile. No greeting. Just recognition. She looked away first, not out of intimidation, but dismissal. And that irritated him more than open defiance ever could. The auction began. Collectors raised numbered paddles with polite nods. Millions exchanged hands with casual gestures. Then resilience was rolled onto the stage. The room shifted. Joyce's attention sharpened. The auctioneer began. Opening bid at $500,000. Joyce lifted her paddle immediately. 500. A competing bidder countered. 6. Joyce didn't hesitate. 7. The pace increased.
Come.
Focused. Then, a new voice entered. 1 million. The room murmured. Joyce didn't need to turn. She knew that voice. Min-Jae stood near the back now, paddle raised lazily, eyes fixed on her instead of the sculpture. He wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at her reaction. Joyce turned slowly. Their gazes locked across the gallery. Her expression didn't change. 1.2 million, she said clearly. Gasps rippled. The auctioneer beamed at the escalating tension. Min-Jae tilted his head slightly. 1.5. The crowd now understood. This wasn't about art. It was about dominance. Joyce studied him carefully. Was he testing her? Provoking her? Trying to outspend her publicly? She raised her paddle again. 2 million. Silence. Absolute silence. The room felt electric. Min-Jae's jaw flexed almost imperceptibly. 2 million was no small declaration even for him. But it wasn't the amount that held him still. It was her face. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't competing with ego. She was simply claiming what she wanted. And she was prepared to pay for it herself. The auctioneer looked toward him expectantly. 2 million once, twice. Min-Jae slowly lowered his paddle. Sold. Applause filled the room. But Joyce wasn't celebrating. She turned toward him as the room buzzed again. And this time, she walked straight toward him. He didn't move. Are you buying art? She asked calmly once she stood before him. Or trying to buy a reaction? The nearest guests froze, pretending not to listen. Min-Jae's expression remained composed. I invest in valuable things. Her eyes sharpened. I'm not an asset. No, he agreed quietly. You're a variable. She folded her arms slightly. You raised the bid without even reviewing the piece. I reviewed you, he replied. The audacity. But there was no mockery in his tone. Just honesty. Joyce stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. If you wanted to impress me, you failed. His gaze darkened, not with anger, but intrigue. And if I wanted to challenge you? You're not challenging me, she said evenly. You're proving you don't like losing. That hit. Because she was right. He had entered the bidding not for the sculpture, but because she wanted it. And that unsettled him. I don't lose, he said quietly. Joyce held his gaze. You just did. The tension between them thickened. Not hostility. Not flirtation. Something sharper. Mutual recognition. He wasn't used to someone dissecting his motives aloud. And she wasn't used to someone meeting her intensity without flinching. Around them, whispers grew. She just embarrassed him. Does she know who she's talking to? But Min-Jae didn't look humiliated. If anything, he looked awakened. You think this is about money, he said softly. It usually is, she replied. He stepped closer, invading her space, but not threatening. Joyce Adeyemi, he said quietly, her name deliberate on his tongue. If I wanted to intimidate you, you would know. She didn't step back. If you wanted to intimidate me, you would have tried already. A long pause. Then something unexpected happened. Min-Jae smiled. Not the polished social smile. Not the strategic one. A real one.
Small.
Controlled. Dangerous. You're right, he admitted. The confession shifted the air. Joyce blinked once, surprised he conceded. I didn't come for the sculpture, he continued. I came because I knew you would. Her breath slowed slightly. And why does that matter? Because you intrigue me, he said simply. No games. No theatrics. Just truth. And that was more disarming than arrogance. She studied him carefully now. This wasn't a spoiled heir throwing money around. This was a man unused to resistance and drawn to it. "You don't know me," she said quietly. "Then let me," he replied. The simplicity of it caught her off guard. For a brief moment, curiosity flickered again. But Joyce had learned long ago that fascination from powerful men could become cages. "I don't need to be discovered," she said calmly. "And I'm not a mystery for you to solve." He held her gaze. "I don't solve mysteries," he replied. "I build empires." "And I build my own," she answered. Another silence.
Charged.
Balanced. Neither overpowering the other. Finally, she stepped back. "I hope you find something worth investing in tonight," she said. "I already did," he replied. She turned away before he could see the faint shift in her expression. As she walked to finalize her purchase, the room parted again. But this time, the whispers weren't about Min-Jae. They were about her. The woman who stood toe-to-toe with the Mafia heir. The woman who didn't tremble. The woman who won. Min-Jae remained still, watching her from across the gallery. He had intended to dominate the room. Instead, he found himself respecting the only person who refused to be impressed by him. And for the first time, winning didn't feel as satisfying as being understood. He didn't outbid her. He let her win. Because somewhere between the first raise and the final hammer, he realized something unsettling. He didn't want to conquer Joyce Adeyemi. He wanted to stand beside her. And that realization was far more dangerous than obsession. Power is loud in public, but it is quiet in private. 3 nights after the auction, rain poured over Seoul in silver sheets, washing neon lights into blurred rivers of color. The city felt softer under storms, less sharp, less watchful. Joyce Adeyemi exited a late business dinner, declining her driver for a short walk to clear her thoughts. The air was cool.
Clean.
She didn't expect to see a familiar black umbrella step into her path. Kang Min-Jae. Alone again. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just him. "You appear wherever I go," she observed calmly. He tilted the umbrella slightly to shield her from the rain. "I prefer to think we share the same circles." "I don't orbit anyone," she replied. A faint breath of amusement escaped him. "I'm starting to notice." Thunder rumbled softly in the distance. For a moment, they stood beneath the awning of a closed cafe, rain cascading like a curtain around them. The world felt suspended, private. Min-Jae studied her profile in the low light. "You think I'm predictable," he said quietly. "I think you're accustomed to control," she corrected. His jaw tightened slightly, not defensive, but thoughtful. "And you think control defines me. I think it protects you." The answer landed deeper than expected. He looked at her fully now. "You analyze people quickly." "I observe," she replied. "You don't speak unless necessary. You measure reactions. You rarely show anger in public." She paused. "But your eyes change when you're challenged." He held her gaze. "And what do they say now?" Joyce didn't hesitate. "They say you're tired." Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The exposing kind. No one had ever dared to say that to him. Tired? He commanded companies, territories, loyalty, fear. But exhaustion wasn't weakness. It was truth. "You see what you want to see," he said carefully. "No," she replied softly. "I see what you hide." Rain intensified around them, isolating their space further. Min-Jae lowered his voice. "You think I hide behind my father?" "I think," Joyce said, turning to face him fully, "I don't know who you are without him." The words struck like lightning. His father's shadow loomed over every boardroom, every negotiation, every whispered rumor about the Kang syndicate. Min-Jae had inherited influence, but not freedom. "You speak boldly about things you don't understand," he said quietly. Her eyes didn't waver. "Then help me understand." That invitation shifted something. He could walk away, dismiss her, intimidate her. Instead, he did something he rarely allowed himself to do. He exhaled. "When you're born into power," he said slowly, "you don't choose it. It chooses you. Every decision is measured. Every weakness noted. Every relationship evaluated. Joyce listened without interruption. My father built an empire from nothing, he continued. He expects me to expand it, not question it. And do you? She asked gently. He hesitated. That hesitation was the answer. I don't have the luxury of doubt, he replied. Joyce stepped slightly closer. Not romantic, but grounding. Everyone has the luxury of choice, she said. Some just fear the consequences. His gaze sharpened, not angry, but raw. You speak like consequences don't exist for you. They do, she said calmly. But I chose mine. A quiet beat passed. You built your company from scratch, he acknowledged. Yes. No inheritance. No safety net. No one to clean up my mistakes, she said. Something in his expression softened. You don't fear losing everything? I fear losing myself more. The honesty between them felt dangerous. Intimate. Min-Jae studied her as though recalculating everything he thought he knew. You assume I've lost myself, he said. I think you've never been allowed to find yourself, she replied. That silenced him completely. The rain began to slow. Traffic noise returned faintly in the background. But neither moved. For the first time since they met, the tension wasn't about ego. It was about vulnerability. You're not what I expected, he admitted quietly. Disappointed, she asked. Disarmed, he corrected. A flicker of something softer passed between them. Not surrender. Not romance. Recognition. You don't fear me, he said again, almost to himself. Joyce held his gaze steadily.
No.
Why? Because fear gives power to the wrong things, she said. And I don't give mine away. That sentence lingered. He wasn't used to someone standing in his presence without calculation. She wasn't trying to manipulate him. She wasn't dazzled. She wasn't seeking protection. She was simply equal. And that equality unsettled him more than submission ever could. You could walk away from me, he said quietly. And nothing would happen. It wasn't a threat. It was reassurance. Her eyes searched his face. Would it? She asked. His expression darkened slightly. Not with menace, but with truth. Not because I would harm you, he clarified, but because my world is not gentle. Joyce nodded slowly. That's what concerns me. A long pause. Then he made a decision in that moment, small but significant. I don't want you dragged into it, he said. Then don't drag me, she replied evenly. He almost smiled. You make everything sound simple. It isn't, she said. But it starts with choice. The rain finally stopped. Streetlights glowed softly against wet pavement. Joyce stepped out from under the awning. My car will be here soon, she said. Min-Jae remained where he stood. Joyce.
She paused.
I don't want to conquer you, he said quietly. If that's what you think. She turned back toward him. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. He didn't answer immediately. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't have a strategic response. I want to know who I am when I'm standing next to you, he admitted. The honesty startled even him. Joyce studied him carefully. That wasn't obsession. That was confusion.
Growth. Possibility.
You don't need me for that, she said gently. But you might need courage. Her car pulled up. She opened the door, then paused one last time. You're not your father's shadow, she said softly. Unless you choose to be. Then she got in. The car drove away. Min-Jae remained on the sidewalk long after the taillights disappeared. No anger. No wounded pride. Just a strange, unfamiliar ache. She hadn't rejected him tonight. She hadn't accepted him either. But she had done something far more dangerous. She had made him question himself. And that was the first crack in the empire he thought was unshakable. For the first time, Kang Min-Jae wasn't thinking about how to win Joyce Adeyemi. He was thinking about how to become someone worthy of standing beside her. And that realization frightened him more than any rival ever could. Power does not tolerate distraction, especially not in families built on fear. 3 days after the rainstorm conversation, whispers began circulating through the undercurrent of Seoul's elite circles. Not in public, not in boardrooms, but in the private lounges where alliances were forged and destroyed. She's becoming visible. He's seen with her too often. The air is softening. And in the calm estate, a fortress of glass, stone, and legacy, those whispers reach the one man whose opinion mattered most. Kang Min-Jae, Min-Jae's father, the architect of an empire built from blood, precision, and discipline. Min-Jae stood across from him in the private study, walls lined with antique weapons and business awards, symbols of dual worlds perfectly balanced. "You've been distracted," his father said without looking up from his documents. "I've been expanding legitimate investments," Min-Jae replied evenly. "That woman," his father corrected. Silence. Min-Jae didn't react. "She is not part of this world," the older man continued. "That makes her either leverage or liability." The word landed like a blade. "She is neither," Min-Jae said quietly. His father's eyes lifted slowly. "Everything is leverage." The unspoken threat was clear. If she becomes weakness, she becomes target. That same evening, Joyce Adeyemi sat in her office reviewing final documents for a major merger deal. Her company had been growing aggressively by strategy, not connections. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again.
And again.
Finally, she answered. Joyce Adeyemi. Silence. Then a male voice, distorted, calm. "You should be careful who admires you." The line disconnected. Her fingers tightened slightly around the phone.
She didn't panic.
But she understood implications. Minutes later, her assistant rushed in. "Ma'am, we just received a withdrawal notice. 3 of our investors are pulling out simultaneously." Joyce's expression remained composed. "On what grounds?" "They won't specify."
She didn't need them to.
Pressure. Coordinated. Intentional. She dismissed her staff and closed the office door. Then she dialed one number she had sworn she wouldn't. He answered on the first ring. "What happened?" Min-Jae asked immediately. She blinked slightly. "You were expecting my call?" "I was expecting something," he replied. Joyce walked toward the window, overlooking the city. 3 investors just withdrew. And I received a warning call. Silence on the other end. But it wasn't confusion. It was recognition. "This is my world bleeding into yours," he said quietly. "I don't need protection," she said firmly. "I know," he replied. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He exhaled slowly. "A test." They met that night in a secure private lounge inside one of Min-Jae's corporate buildings. This time, there were guards outside. Joyce noticed. "So this is the part where I become collateral damage?" she asked coolly. Min-Jae stepped closer, tension in every line of his posture. "I told you my world isn't gentle. And I told you I won't be your vulnerability."
His jaw tightened.
"You're not my weakness." "Then prove it," she challenged. The air thickened. "You think I orchestrated this?" he asked. "I think proximity to you changes equations." His voice lowered. "I would never weaponize your business." "I didn't say you would," she replied. "But someone might." That was the truth neither wanted to say aloud. His rivals had noticed her. And rivals exploited leverage. Min-Jae stepped closer, not aggressively, but urgently. "I can fix this." "With threats?" she asked sharply. "With influence." "That's still power." He looked at her as if she was forcing him to confront something uncomfortable. "You're asking me to do nothing." "I'm asking you not to turn me into something I'm not," she said quietly. "I built my company without fear tactics." "And if fear tactics are being used against you?" She met his gaze evenly. "Then I fight." Something in him shifted at that. Not frustration. Respect. "You would risk everything just to stay independent?" he asked. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. He studied her carefully. Most people clung to power when it was offered. She pushed it away, even when it could save her. "You don't understand the scale of this," he said. "And you don't understand me," she replied softly. The room fell silent. Then something unexpected happened. Min-Jae stepped back, not away from her, but away from control. "You're right," he said quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly.
"About what?"
"I don't want you as leverage. I don't want you protected because you're with me." And I don't want your success tied to my name. That admission wasn't easy. It cost him pride. If I intervene, he continued, it won't be visible. It won't touch your reputation. And it won't be something you owe me for. She searched his face carefully. You do that? Yes. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was more vulnerable than he liked. Because I respect you. The words were steady, unforced.
Real.
Joyce felt the shift. This wasn't obsession. This wasn't conquest. This was a man learning restraint. Respect isn't possession, she said gently. I'm starting to understand that, he replied. A quiet moment passed between them. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at it, jaw tightening slightly. My father has scheduled a dinner tomorrow, he said. And he wants to meet you. Joyce's spine straightened instantly. Why? To assess you. The word carried weight. Joyce stepped back slightly. I'm not being evaluated. I know, he said quickly. And I won't allow that. You can't control your father. No, Min-Jae admitted. But I can choose my alignment. The sentence lingered heavily. She studied him carefully. Is that what this is? She asked quietly. A choice. His gaze didn't waver. Yes. And for the first time, Joyce saw the fracture line between father and son. Saw the cost of defiance. Saw the risk. You challenge your family over someone who hasn't even agreed to be with you? She asked softly. He gave a faint, almost bitter smile. You rejected me twice. 3 times, she corrected. That almost made him laugh. But I still choose you, he said quietly. The room stilled. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just honest. Joyce's breath slowed. You don't choose me, she said gently. You choose who you become. His eyes searched hers. And if becoming better means walking away from parts of my empire, then maybe it wasn't yours to begin with. Silence. Heavy. Transformative. For the first time in his life, Kang Min-Jae was standing at a crossroads not dictated by legacy, but by desire. And not desire for possession. Desire for growth. Joyce stepped closer. Not romantic. Not surrendering. But steady. I won't be your breaking point, she said quietly. And I won't be your rebellion. Then what are you? He asked. She held his gaze. A mirror. The truth of that hit harder than any threat. Because mirrors force reflection. And reflection forces change. That night, Min-Jae returned to his father's estate with something heavier than anger. Conviction. If loving Joyce Adeyemi meant redefining power, then perhaps power was overdue for evolution. And somewhere deep inside the Kang Empire, the foundation had just begun to crack. The dinner at the Kang estate was never meant to be pleasant. It was meant to be strategic. Joyce Adeyemi stood at the entrance of the towering glass mansion overlooking Seoul's skyline. The structure was breathtaking, minimalist architecture masking old-world authority. Min-Jae stood beside her. Not ahead. Not leading. Beside. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Joyce adjusted the cuff of her tailored ivory suit. I don't, she agreed. But I don't run from evaluation either. His jaw tightened slightly. You're not here to be evaluated. She looked at him. Then why am I here? Before he could answer, the doors opened. Kang Dae-hyun was already seated at the head of the long dining table when they entered. Silver hair, measured eyes, the kind of presence that didn't need volume to command silence. He studied Joyce with unsettling calm. So, the older man said, voice smooth as steel, this is the woman disrupting my son's discipline. Joyce didn't flinch. I wasn't aware discipline was so fragile, she replied evenly. A subtle pause. Min-Jae's father leaned back slightly, intrigued rather than offended. She is bold, he observed. She is honest, Min-Jae corrected. Dinner began. Polite questions wrapped in hidden assessments. Your company's growth is impressive, the elder Kang noted. Especially without institutional backing. I prefer independence, Joyce answered. Independence is expensive, he replied. I can afford it. The tension was not explosive. It was surgical, calculated. Then the patriarch placed his fork down. "You are intelligent, Miss Adeyemi," he said calmly. "But proximity to my son changes the stability of your world." Joyce met his gaze directly. Stability built on fear is temporary. The room went still. Min-Jae watched his father carefully. This was the moment.
The invisible line.
"And if fear keeps enemies obedient?" the elder man asked. "Then it breeds stronger enemies," Joyce replied. Silence lingered. Then something unexpected happened. Kang Dae-hyun smiled faintly. "You are not naive," he said. "That makes you dangerous." Joyce didn't respond, because she understood what he meant. Dangerous not physically, but ideologically. She represented change, and change threatened legacy. When dinner ended, Min-Jae walked her outside into the cool night air. "You didn't have to spar with him," he said quietly. "I didn't spar," she replied. "I answered." He exhaled slowly. "He will test you." I assumed. "And if he decides you are inconvenient?" Joyce stopped walking. "Then that's your test, not mine." The words hung between them. Because she was right. The choice was his. 2 nights later, the test arrived. Joyce's car was forced to stop abruptly on a dimly lit street after a black SUV blocked her path. Her driver reacted quickly, but masked men surrounded the vehicle. Not amateur. Professional. Joyce's pulse accelerated, but her mind stayed sharp. This wasn't random. The rear door was opened. But before anyone could touch her, another convoy of vehicles stormed in. Doors slammed. Men in dark suits moved with lethal precision. The attackers retreated immediately. Within seconds, it was over. Min-Jae stepped out of the lead vehicle. Fury radiated from him. Not reckless, but controlled and deadly. He opened her car door himself. "Are you hurt?" "No," she replied steadily. "You were expecting this." "Yes." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to alarm you." "You don't get to decide that for me," she said sharply. His jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that?" The night air felt heavy with unspoken truths. "They weren't random," she said quietly.
No.
"Your father?" "No," he answered firmly. "Rivals. Testing my restraint." Joyce stepped out of the car fully now. And what happens when they realize restraint isn't weakness? Min-Jae's eyes darkened. They won't survive long enough to realize it. That answer revealed everything. This was the world he came from. Elimination.
Power.
Finality. She looked at him carefully. "And that's your solution?" "It's the only language they understand." Joyce studied him under the streetlights. "You're standing at a crossroads," she said softly.
They forced that, he replied.
"No," she corrected. "You did. The moment you chose not to be your father." Silence. The men around them waited for orders. For violence. For retaliation. Min-Jae looked at Joyce. Then at his men. Then back at her. In that moment, something shifted. He gave a different command. "Stand down." His men hesitated slightly. "Track them. Freeze assets." No retaliation tonight. Shock rippled subtly through his security team. This wasn't the Kang way. Joyce noticed. "You're changing rules," she said quietly. "I'm choosing timing," he corrected. But even he knew it was more than that. He wasn't abandoning power. He was redefining it. Later that night, they stood alone on the balcony of his corporate tower. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath them. "You could walk away," he said quietly. "From what?" "From this. From me. Before it escalates." Joyce leaned against the railing. "Do you want me to?" His answer came without hesitation.
No.
The honesty in his voice carried weight. "You can't protect me from your world entirely," she said. "I know. And I won't shrink because of it. I don't want you to." She turned to face him. "Then understand something, Min-Jae." He met her gaze. "If I stay near you, it's not because I'm impressed by power." He stepped closer. "Then why?" "Because I see who you're trying to become." The air between them felt charged. Different from before. Less combative. More vulnerable. "You make me question everything," he admitted. "Good." He almost smiled. You're not afraid I'll fail? She held his gaze steadily. I'm afraid you won't try. That hit harder than any threat. For the first time, Kang Min-Jae understood something clearly. Joyce Adeyemi wasn't his weakness. She was his evolution. And evolution always comes with resistance. He stepped closer now. Close enough to feel her breath. Not possessive. Not demanding. Just honest. If I dismantle parts of my father's empire, he said quietly, there will be consequences. For you? For everyone. Joyce didn't step back. Then build something better. The simplicity of her faith in him was more terrifying than opposition. He reached out slowly, hesitating only briefly, then brushed a loose curl from her face. A small gesture, but intimate. She didn't pull away. The space between them narrowed. Tension softened into something warmer.
Slower.
His voice dropped. I don't want to conquer you. I know. I don't want to cage you. I wouldn't allow it. A faint smile curved his lips. I'm aware. Their foreheads almost touched. The city wind moved gently around them. And for the first time, the tension wasn't about ego or challenge. It was about trust. He stopped just before his lips could meet hers. Not because he didn't want to, but because this moment needed to be chosen, not taken. Joyce searched his face. You're learning restraint, she whispered. For you, he replied. For yourself, she corrected. And in that correction, he finally understood. This wasn't about winning her. It was about becoming someone capable of loving without control. Below them, the city pulsed with power struggles and silent wars. But on that balcony, a different battle was being fought. Legacy versus identity. Fear versus growth. Control versus choice. And Kang Min-Jae was beginning to understand that the most dangerous rebellion was choosing to change. Power does not surrender quietly. It retaliates. The attack on Joyce was not random. It was strategic. A message sent to Kang Min-Jae from rivals who believed affection made him predictable. They were wrong, but they were not entirely mistaken either. Inside the Kang estate, the atmosphere felt different. Heavy. Anticipatory. Min-Jae stood across from his father, once more in the private study, the same room lined with relics of violence and victory. I handled it, Min-Jae said calmly. His father's eyes were unreadable. You showed restraint, Kang Dae-hyun replied. Yes. That is not our way. Min-Jae held his ground. It will be. The older man's gaze sharpened. You would rewrite decades of power for a woman? Min-Jae's voice did not rise. I would redefine power because the old way breeds endless war. A long silence followed. You sound like her, his father said. Maybe I finally sound like myself. That was the first true act of rebellion. Not shouting. Not defiance. Identity. You think legitimacy will protect you? His father continued. You think rivals respect softness? They respect leverage, Min-Jae replied. And I have more of it in boardrooms than battlefields. The elder Kang studied his son carefully. You are willing to fracture this empire. I'm willing to evolve it. And if evolution weakens us? It won't. The room felt smaller somehow. For the first time in his life, Min-Jae wasn't negotiating for approval. He was declaring direction. And the woman? His father asked quietly. Min-Jae didn't hesitate. She is not a liability. She is not leverage. And she will never be touched. That was not a threat. It was a promise. The older man leaned back slowly, measuring his son in a way he hadn't before. You would choose her over legacy? Min-Jae's answer came steady. I'm choosing who I become. Silence stretched long. Then something unexpected flickered in his father's expression, not anger. Recognition. You are not abandoning the empire, the older man said finally. No. You are reshaping it. Yes. Another pause. You have my opposition, Kang Dae-hyun said calmly. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. But, his father continued, you also have my curiosity. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection either. And in the Kang family, that was monumental. 2 days later, under a Seoul sky washed clean by winter light, Min-Jae asked Joyce to meet him at the same balcony where everything began. No security. No spectacle. Just the city humming below. Joyce stepped out in a deep burgundy coat, wind catching her curls gently. "You look serious," she observed. "I am." She walked beside him, leaning against the railing. "So," she said lightly, "are we being tested again?" "No," he replied. "This time, I'm choosing." Her expression softened slightly. "About everything." He turned to face her fully. "I spent my life inheriting decisions," he began. "Expectations. Methods. Enemies." She listened carefully. "But when you walked into that ballroom and looked at me like I was just a man, you disrupted something." A faint smile touched her lips. "That wasn't my intention." "I know. That's why it mattered." The wind shifted between them. "I almost turned you into a challenge," he admitted. "Something to win." "You tried," she said softly. "Yes." "And?" He stepped closer. "And you refused to be conquered." She held his gaze steadily. "You don't need conquering." "No," he agreed. "I needed correction." That earned the smallest laugh from her. But his expression remained earnest. "I've begun restructuring parts of the family operations," he continued. "Legal fronts are becoming the core. Illicit branches are being dismantled." Joyce blinked. "That's not minor change." "I know. There will be backlash." "I know. And you're certain?" He didn't look away. "I'm done ruling through fear." A long silence settled between them. Not tense. Reflective. "You're not doing this for me," she said carefully. "No," he replied. "I'm doing it because you made me see I had a choice." That mattered. More than grand gestures. More than protection.
Choice.
She stepped closer now. "And what are you choosing about us?" she asked quietly. His voice lowered. "I want you. Not as an accessory to power. Not as rebellion against my father. Not as obsession." He took a slow breath. "I want you because you challenge me. Because you refuse to shrink. Because you don't fear me. Because when I stand next to you, I'm not the Mafia heir." He paused. "I'm just a man trying to be better." Joyce's heart beat slower, deeper. "You drove yourself crazy trying to win me," she said softly. "I know. You tried to outspend me." "Yes." "You tried to provoke me." "Yes." "You nearly turned me into a battlefield." His jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." She stepped even closer. "And yet you learned." He searched her eyes. "I'm still learning." That honesty broke the final barrier. Joyce reached for his hand. "Not surrender. Not submission.
Choice."
"You never needed to win me," she whispered. His voice was almost a breath. "What did I need? To grow." He closed the small distance between them. "And now?" She looked at him, the man who had once walked into rooms like he owned them, now standing still, waiting. "Now," she said softly, "you can try again." His hand tightened around hers, not possessive. Grateful. This time when he leaned in, it wasn't dominance. It was permission. Their kiss was slow, measured, earned, not explosive, but powerful. Below them, the city still carried whispers of syndicates and shifting alliances. Rivals were watching. Boardrooms were recalculating. The Kang Empire was changing. But up there, two people stood not as weakness and power, not as conquest and resistance, but as equals. Min-Jae rested his forehead lightly against hers. "You realize this won't be easy." Joyce smiled faintly. "I've never chosen easy." He exhaled softly. "Good." The heir to an empire had been pursued by every woman who wanted proximity to power. But the only woman who mattered was the one who rejected him. And in that rejection, she forced him to confront himself. Not to win her, but to deserve her. And that transformation was the most dangerous revolution of all.